For more on this, we are now joined by Counsel for the Advancement of the South African Constitution, Research Officer Dan Mafora. Dan, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition. Of course, we have seen the nomination of Kholeka Gcaleka for the Public Protector for the next 7 years. Perhaps let's start off with this. What is your reaction? Many people are not surprised by the front runner in this regard.
Thanks so much for having me. So no surprises there. I think going in, she had an advantage over all of the other candidates, being the person that's currently acting in the position and the Deputy Public Protector. And so she has the kind of institutional knowledge that a lot of the other candidates didn't necessarily have. And so that was not a surprise at all. But I also think that objectively looking at the interview process that we saw, I think it was last week, it was clear that she performed really well in comparison to the other candidates. And so it is not at all a surprise that she was the candidate that was put forward.
I'm sure you saw our insert there, a number of political parties raising their concerns, saying that she's compromised, some of them questioning whether she is impartial and she would be, the good choice for the job of public protector. What are your thoughts on the concerns being raised by other political parties in Parliament?
Look, I think there are these are obviously questions about her report into the Phala incident. And I think that, there are reasonable concerns that have been raised about, was the investigation as thorough as it could have been? Could she have sought to establish more facts than she did in her report? But on the other hand, there are people saying, well, you need to be cautious as the public protector, not be overzealous and overreach. Which is what Busisiwe Mkhwebane is accused of having done. And so it is a delicate balancing act. I think that that shouldn't cast a dark shadow over her candidacy. I think that, the EFF and the DA both raise the question of this report as kind of like this thing that should disqualify her. But really the question, at least at a constitutional level, is whether or not she's qualified to take the position, whether or not she has a vision for the office, she has the necessary skills. And we know that she was interviewed about 3.5 years ago for the deputy position, and they thought her good enough to do that. And so, there's that mismatch in what what the Constitution requires of the holder of the office, and what these parties, at least from a political point of view, think of her as an occupier of that office.
What are your thoughts on some saying that should a Kholeka be appointed as a public protector, it would seem like a political reward, especially after citing that report in which she conducted the Phala farm saga. What would you say about some saying that this would be a political reward for taking that decision in that report?
Look, I think that criticism would be fair if the president had the sole discretion to appoint her, right? So if the president just woke up one day and said, this is who I want to be the next public protector, as kind of like a kickback or reward for the report, as you say, I think that would be a fair criticism. But like it was said in the inset, the ANC only has 230 of the 240 seats or votes that are needed to pass her nomination through. And I think that unless people are saying the IFP has a vested interest in President Ramaphosa being kind of let scot-free for what happened at Phala, then there needs to be more that is said about Advocate Gcaleka and her integrity that should say that this is just, a political reward. I don't think that's fair at all. I think that the Constitution has in place checks and balances, and this is one of them where it says you need 60% of the NA or the National Assembly to appoint this person. And once that 60% is reached, which is likely to be the case here, then the president has no choice but to appoint. But I don't think that it's a fair criticism to make, especially of Advocate Gcaleka.
And now that the recommendation has been made by this committee to recommend Kholeka Gcaleka for the position of public protector, what is the process that will be followed now by the National Assembly and the president?
So the committee's report is going to go to the National Assembly, and then they will table a vote, a resolution to recommend her to the president. And then in terms of the Constitution, the president must appoint whoever the National Assembly puts forward, and that is likely to happen. If it's announced before, then it's likely to happen only after the 14th of October, as we know, or later after that.
And what is the likelihood of Kholeka Gcaleka ascending to that position, especially, with the approval of the IFP?
I think if everything goes well, if everything goes according to plan, and if the ANC, has all of its MPs in the House on that day, they should be able to push a nomination through with the vote of the IFP. But of course, you never know with these things. Yeah. We know, for example, that with the Inspector General of Intelligence, they were not able to get the necessary votes and had to rerun the process. So that is also a possibility.
And, if the IFP is not willing to come to the party and decides to change its mind, what will the process then be followed? The DA is calling for fresh interviews in this regard. What would then take place before we see a new public protector?
So that isn't as clear. It isn't set out in any particular way. What is likely to happen is that they would look at the list of candidates in the order that they were ranked and consider who from that list to put forward in her place. I don't think that it's a possibility that they would run the process all over again. There would be a vacancy in that office once the incumbent leaves on the 14th of October. So the possibility of that whole process being run again is very slim.
Yeah, all right then, Dan, thank you so much for your contribution here on SABC News. That is Dan Mafora, Research Officer for the Council for Advancement of the South African Constitution.